Welcome to Rambam and Death. Today we'll be discussing the Rambam Hilchas Tefillah Birkat Kohanim Perik Yudalid Halacha Yud. In Halacha Test, the Rambam begins to describe the Mitzvah of Birkat Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash, and he says the following in Halacha Yud: Va'emen mas Hashem kichsavai, v'hu davar hanege yudkei vavkei. They would say the Shem when they said Birkat Kohanim. They would say Hashem's name, not the way we say it, Aleph Daled Nun Yud Adnai, but they would say with the Shem Yud Kei Vavke the way it's written. And Bezehu Hashem HaMefurish HaOmer B'chol Makom. This is the Shem HaMefurish that's mentioned in all different places. This is what they would do in the Beit HaMikdash. But that's only in the Beit HaMikdash. In Medina, however, outside the Beit HaMikdash, Eimer Noisa B'Kinuya V'hu Aleph Daled. They would say it outside the Beit HaMikdash with its kinui, the name that we use, Aleph Daled, Shem Adnai, and the reason for that is She'em Askirin as a Shem Kichsava El B'Mikdash Bovad. You would only mention the Shem the way it's written only in the Beit HaMikdash. Then the Rambam adds, U'Meshemeis Shimon HaTzadik Pasku HaKainim Malavarach V'Shem HaMeferish Afila B'Mikdash. When Shimon HaTzadik, the Kohen Gadol, in the beginning of the second Beit HaMikdash, when he passed away, there was a decline in the stature of the Jewish people, and as a result, they no longer would say the Shem HaMeferish, even of the Beit HaMikdash. And the reason for that is, in order that someone who's unworthy should not be able to learn how to pronounce it. In addition, even the early sages would not teach this to their students and their children, even if they were worthy, more than once in 7 years. Why is that? Because they didn't want it to become popularized, that people should learn how to pronounce it. And Kol Zeh Gedula L'Shmei Hanich B'Haner. All this is to lend greatness to the glorious and awesome name of Hashem. So the Rambam makes it very clear that after Shimon HaTzadik passed away, they no longer use the Shem HaMeferish. So the question is asked, the Tosfos Rid and other Achrayim as well, they ask the question, if there's a chiyuv to say the Shem HaMeferish min Torah, how could it be that Chachamim took it away after Shimon HaTzadik? Because of a chashash, there's no longer a way of being mekayim the mitzvah the way it's required. So the Tosfos Rid himself says that, number one, it could be that it's not meyakiv. Chatchila, you're supposed to use the Shem HaMeferish, but even if you didn't use it, it's still a valid Birkas Kohanim. And the second answer he gives, that when the Gemara says that they stopped using the Shem HaMeferish, it's talking about not the Shem of 4 letters, Yud Kei Vav Kei, but a different kind of a Shem of 12 letters. The Rambam, however, can't use any of those answers, because from the Rambam it seems the way he lumps together the Chiyuv of Shem HaMeferish with all the other requirements of Birkas Kohanim that are ma'akiv, so it seems that the Rambam holds that it is ma'akiv, that you have to mention the Shem HaMeferish. So then how could it be that the Chachamim changed that because of a chashash, because of a concern that other people who are unworthy would learn how to say it? And also, the Rambam makes it very clear the Shem HaMeferish all over means the Shem of 4 letters. So, and he bases it on other sources that disagree with the Gemara in Kedushin, which seems to distinguish between the two Shemus. So there's a Sefer Kapei Chaim on the Hilchas of Nesias Kapayim, and in this Sefer he gives 2 very nice answers. Answer number 1, he says that, yes, it's true that Birkas Kohanim could only be recited b'di'evet. It has to be recited with Shem HaMeferish. But what's the reason it has to be recited with Shem HaMeferish? Because that brings and lends greatness to Hashem. That's very true. When it does lead to a person glorifying Hashem's name, because it's said by people who are worthy people. But the same halacha, in other words, the reason why you need the Shem HaMeferish is not because Birkas Kohanim needs Shem HaMeferish. It's because in the Beit HaMikdash you need the Shem HaMeferish because it brings glory to Hashem's name. But if, for whatever reason, it wouldn't bring glory to Hashem's name, so then there's no chiyuv in the Beit HaMikdash to mention Hashem's name, the Shem HaMeferish. So that's why when after Shimon HaTzadik passed away, and people reciting the Shem HaMeferish will lead to the opposite of glory to the Eibishter for his name, So then there's no chiyuv in the Beit HaMikdash to say the Shem HaMeferish. And it's not if it would be a din in Nesias Kapayim. Nesias Kapayim requires the Shem HaMeferish, then you would have no way out. You couldn't just change it without abolishing and eliminating the chiyuv min Torah. But it's not a din in Nesias Kapayim, it's a din in the Beit HaMikdash. In a place like the Beit HaMikdash, where it brings glory to Hashem's name, you have to say Shem HaMeferish. But if it stops bringing glory, it does the opposite. Just like we find by a Shevuot. He doesn't give this example, but it's a good example. Just like by a Shevuot. The Rambam counts Shevuos Emes as a mitzvah, min Torah, to give a Shevuos Emes. But not everyone is supposed to give a Shevuot. It's after he has to have all the spiritual milas. Why? Because the whole idea of a Shevuot is to bring glory to Hashem. When you swear in His name, and the Shevuot is Emes, and you're a person of high stature, high moral stature, it lends greatness to Hashem. Because that's the whole idea of a Shevuot, that you're bringing Hashem into it. But if the person is not a worthy person, then there's no mitzvah to mention, to give a Shevuot be'emes, because it doesn't bring glory to Hashem. Same thing over here. After Shimon HaTzadik, it would no longer bring glory, so the chiyuv of doing it at the Beit HaMikdash was no longer there. And since it's not a chelik of the mitzvah Birkat Kohanim itself, then you're mekayim the mitzvah Birkat Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash without any reservation, without any question. Then he gives another very good answer. He says there are two dinim actually. There's a din of Nesias Kapayim in the Beit HaMikdash, and there's a din of Nesias Kapayim Birkas Kohanim b'gvulin outside the Beit HaMikdash. So yes, it's true that if you didn't say the Shem HaMeferish, then you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of Birkas Kohanim of the Beit HaMikdash. But it doesn't mean that you're precluded from fulfilling the mitzvah of Birkas Kohanim that applies all over Eretz Yisrael, all over the world. And therefore, it's true, you eliminated the mitzvah of doing it at the Beit HaMikdash, but you still have the Kiyum HaMitzvah. There's one mitzvah essa of Birkas Kohanim. There's just these two scenarios for it. If you can't do the scenario that has both milas, regular Birkas Kohanim and Beit HaMikdash Birkas Kohanim, you at least have the milah of Birkas Kohanim of Gvulin.